coming to you from Israel in the Galilee, and it looks like we got a pretty good live stream going. Let me move some things around. It's set up, and I set up a internet repeater here, and that should help things. This is. You okay? My wife dropped something, I think. So we're going to go through what the peace plan that Trump did for his Nobel Peace Prize, which he unlikely will get, but maybe. And it's certainly nothing like what they're making out to be. This whole thing will be over within 1 to 2 weeks. That's it. It's a phase 1, and it's basically a hostage exchange. And somehow Trump, in his overall stupidity, arranged for Israel to give back 1,950 terrorist prisoners for 20 living hostages. Well, if you think those numbers are good, hey, I don't. It should have been 20. Not anything like that. Hamas is going to try to make it look like a victory, but it's not all that likely that they can pull that off. I'm not so sure that it's manageable. They don't have enough to go with on that. They'll try. Trump pulled this off in the nick of time because tomorrow the Nobel Peace Prize people in Norway are going to make an award for the Nobel Peace Prize. In the nick of time because tomorrow, or they might not give it to anybody. They are only supposed to do it for something that accomplishes lasting peace. And I'm going to give you the breakdown and show you this could be over in 1 week. So Netanyahu is not losing his war. They're just taking a break. 20 living hostages are going to start coming back today and tomorrow, from what I'm understanding. There's a very slight withdrawal of Israel from the Gaza Strip, and there's going to be a massive surge of humanitarian aid during this time period, which could be over in a week. They're talking 800 trucks a day or something. Something bad happened. They're opening up 2 crossings for humanitarian aid. One is the Rafah crossing from Egypt, and the packages are supposed to be inspected by UN workers. Well, the UN workers work for Hamas. So, um, could be a problem. I don't know. Egypt might be afraid to get into it at this early stage. They may not let it happen. I don't know. I'll get into all the details, and I'm going to show you the scriptures and show you where Israel really got in trouble with the Lord here. I mean, there's always worse ways, but this was pretty bad. I'm going to do that with the scriptures. But don't expect much for this. I'm not seeing it. Now, I got myself under the impression that there would be peace when Elijah's working and the next temple comes down, as in Malachi 3. But then the Lord was correcting me, and there probably will be peace, but it's not going to come from these ceasefires. It'll come from wipeout, more likely. Okay, these ceasefires are just, I don't know what, I don't know the pressure that got put on Hamas, but it must have been great. And Trump probably made concessions to Egypt, the UAE, Qatar, and likely Saudi Arabia if they were involved, which to some extent I'm sure they were, to put the pressure on Hamas. Iran would have told them no. Turkey was involved too. So a lot of pressure went on, and they agreed to it. So far, there's going to be a signing today at approximately 11, 12 o'clock our time here in the Middle East, in Egypt. Trump is supposed to be flying over here. I don't think Trump's going to Egypt. If I was Trump, I wouldn't go to Egypt. I think the Secret Service would try to take Trump to the Supreme Court and get a restraining order against him if he really decided to go to Egypt, because that's a very unstable country. I don't think they would want him going there. They wouldn't want to go either. So, but Israel's fine. So, what we got to watch with Israel is Iran doing a missile launch to try to kill Trump. Now, don't convince yourself that what I just said could never happen. Don't do that to yourself. It could. I told you a long time ago from prophecy, speaking of this Nebuchadnezzar in Jeremiah 50:51, meaning the head of America. I thought, and I still do, there's a reasonably decent case that Trump could be assassinated. I don't know. It looked like it. Could still happen. Okay, I want to get into this with you and tell you everything that happened. Tell you some of the other problems we're having in the world, like with Ukraine and Russia. And we'll get into all this stuff. Okay. My post is going to take seconds, is all. It's supposed to rain today in Israel, pretty surprising. They're warning people of 10 inches of snow in America now. Coming days, I don't think today, but coming days. I think 10 states or something like that. It must be northeast, I guess, or central north or northwest or something north. I do remember on rare occasions it would snow in New York in October, but we're generally speaking latter October. But we're not that far off. What are we on today? The 9th? It could be in it. So if it's in another next week or something, yeah, it could be. Let's take a look at our weather. I don't know what's going on. I got so obsessed with this. 69 degrees now. That's nice. High is 79. Nicer. Cloudy, but it could rain, yeah. My forecast isn't telling me rain. I'm getting a high of 79 tomorrow, high 82, then 83, then 82, then 86, then 83, then 80, 80, so forth. So the heat wave is pretty much over, and I see no rain forecast for 10, 11 days. So that would make sense. The rain normally shows around Thanksgiving. Sometimes we get fortunate and it comes mid-December, late December. That's great. Because then it starts getting nice to go sit outside. Okay. Being a Bible-believing site, we'll do some praise. Check the... I think I got plenty of bandwidth going. There is no God like Jehovah. 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 There is no Messiah like Yeshua. 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 Okay. People are probably going to start planning trips to Israel based on this ceasefire, but it's nothing like what you think. So let me get into this with you. I don't have any prayer requests today. Before we get into this, let me tell you what China and Iran are up to. Because we still got a big problem with Iran. They're trading missiles for oil. Now, China is, to the best that we know, giving them anti-aircraft missiles. They're called surface-to-air. So China's not in the mood to get slammed because they're giving Iran surface-to-surface aggressive offensive missiles. They're scared to do that. They don't want that. Nobody seems to get mad when you give another country defensive missiles. apparently Israel gave some to Ukraine a while ago. I keep reading that Iran is buying or trading for 90% of Iran's oil. And I'm also reading that India wants to stop trading oil or buying oil from Russia and buying it from Iran. So China may not like that. So Iran was receiving what was called Chinese HO 98 surface-to-air missiles. I don't think they're going to stop our F-35s that are stealthy. I will find out, but I don't think so. The HO 98 is supposed to be comparable to Russia's S-300, which is complete junk. The S-400 is less junky or junk. And we don't know much about the S-500. I think only Russia uses those, and it's probably junk. It's supposed to be able to work anti-stealth. I don't think it's there. So, okay. On the occasion of the Iranian Navy Day, the commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Mohammed Palpour, sends a warning to the United States and the West in general, Europe, North America. Any mistake you make in the Persian Gulf or the Strait of Hormuz, which is really in the Persian Gulf, that's the pincher point that Iran has control over, basically, right near Iran, will be met with a devastating response. Well, they're worried about, well, I'll keep reading. This threat comes against the backdrop of the Iranian concerns that the West will begin to detain Iranian ships for inspection following the entry into force of the snapback sanctions, which permit, it's a UN declaration, permit the use of this inspection procedure. So if any ship belonging to a country in the UN sees an Iranian ship and suspects it's moving goods that are prohibited for Iran to move due to the snapback sanctions, they can stop the ship. These are merchant marine ships that don't have artillery and missile launches and torpedoes, to stop the ship and search it. And if it does have contraband, the next situation would probably be to confiscate the ship. So Iran is issuing these very harsh warnings, but you got to remember that that's their fear, and they write a lot of checks like this that they can't cash. They feel they have to do something and they don't know what else to do, so they threaten. Okay? I don't think anybody pays attention to them anymore. Putin and Russia must achieve all objectives of the special, this is Putin talking, Russia must achieve all the objectives of the military operation pertaining to Ukraine. The strategy initiated on the frontier belonging to the Russian Federation. So it's basically calling that land Russia. So he's not stopping, he's saying. Okay. Next, Netherlands opens a joint drone and battery factory with Ukraine. How about that? Ukraine drones are worthwhile. Yeah, they work good against Russia. So I guess the Netherlands wants in on it, And if you open up the factory, you're going to get them at a very cheap price. So why not? Battery, I don't know from the batteries. What kind of batteries? Lithium? What are we talking about? I don't know. Iran reported a new outbreak of highly contagious HSN1 bird flu. So, Tweety bird's getting sick in Iran, huh? Well, Iran getting plagues is, of course, should not surprise anybody. You think that Iran is waging against Israel, but they're really waging war against God for the sake of the demons, and that's what they're really doing. And people tend to disregard that and, they hate Israel. Well, they hate God. They don't hate people they don't have any contact with. They're a long way off. The October 7th terrorists that took part actively in the murder and rape and so forth of Israelis in the October 7th invasion are not going to be exchanged back to Hamas. It may be. That's what I'm reading. I don't know how true it is. Probably true, but with 1950 prisoners being exchanged, I think that's going to pretty well empty the jails. What Israel's doing there, is getting their budget down. I mean, if you're running, give you an idea what this looks like. Let's say you're running 6,000 prisoners in jail, which we probably got rid of that many or close to it. Let's say we keep it easy, we got rid of 5,000. And America spends $75 for a prisoner a year, 75,000 So let's say Israel spends 40,000 or something like that. So you got 5,000 times 40,000. And that's a very, very low figure, but let's see what it breaks to. That's $200 million. So this next batch, Israel's probably saving 300, even $500 million a year. But the bad news here, and this is what Trump should never put up with this, is it encourages terrorism because Israel doesn't apply the death penalty. So the terrorists come in and they attack Jewish children, little kids, babies, mothers, old people with knives and guns, and they get arrested, they get put in jail, and they just wait for a prisoner swap. Then they go back to a life of terrorism. They get arrested again. Prisoner swap. If they screw up, they get shot. If they get shot by a female soldier, supposedly they don't get to go to heaven and get their 70 virgins, but the mullahs might have written a fatwa about that where they give them an exemption. They probably did. That's one of the reasons Israel likes to have female bomber pilots. That disturbs them. What the Americans did fighting the Muslim Moros in the Philippines around 1900, a little before 1900, is they, before we had sophisticated ammunition manufacturing, remember that, in the Civil War, a lot of the guns used were, they were muskets where you had a rod and you carried round pellet balls, right? And you had patches, which were cloth, and you had powder in a horn-looking thing. So after you fired a round, of course you had to make sure you had no burning powder in the gun, okay? You could do that by taking a ramrod and ramming it, and if there was anything burning, you could put it out, especially if it was wet, but they didn't have to. So what they would do is they would basically put powder inside the barrel, and then they would put a patch in there to keep the powder in, and then they would put a round lead ball in there and another patch to keep that in place. Then they would pull their hammer back where they had a device that would make a spark and ignite the powder, and they would fire one round, and then they had to redo it. Now, at the time of the Civil War, I think they had a few guns floating around that were using cartridges, and not long after the Civil War, they had really gone away with that type of approach, and they were using cartridge guns. But they weren't that sophisticated. They were just basically using a lead bullet, usually in a brass casing, and that was what they used, So by the time you got to the late 1890s, things were getting more sophisticated, and the soldiers learned to make what was called a dum-dum bullet. It worked good on a lead bullet. You took a sharp knife, like your Bowie knife, and you cut across into the bullet that probably went 1/4 of an inch or so, and then you'd have an X like this, and you'd have two of them. You didn't want too many because it would be unstable, and then when you shot the bullet, they would stay together. And when it hit somebody, there was a good chance that these pieces would break off and make different wound channels inside the person, which would cause more shock. it would cause more bleeding and damage and stuff like that. It was a lot harder for the doctors to repair the wound, and that's what they were doing. But they took it a little further with the Moros. They realized that they could burrow out a little space after they made their X, or they just created a cavity in the lead with a knife, you know, and they put pork fat in there. So they had the Muslims convinced for a while that if they got shot with one of these bullets, they weren't going to go to heaven. So one of the mullahs, one of their preachers, came out with a fatwa telling them, no, you didn't do it voluntarily, you were okay. Reminds me of the ultra-Orthodox today. A lot of people in Israel, including us, have solar-powered lights around the property. So they charge during the day, and they don't go on unless they detect motion. Okay? I suppose you could get some that would go on without motion. Maybe they could set these somehow. But then you would probably need to have a better solar collector, because it would have to hold more solar. This way, I don't think there's batteries in there or something. I don't know. But anyway, they work. So if an animal walks by, the light goes on. So when the ultra orthodox believe that you're not allowed, the scripture says not kindle a fire, which means start a fire. So they say when you put a light on, you're starting a fire because the filament glows. Well, I don't see smoke come out of the light bulb, and I don't see the light bulb get burned up and go away. You see? But they do, apparently. It's not the same thing, but they take it that far. And when they walk by a house that has these solar lights, they are turning the lights on. And if they do that on Shabbat, that's when they don't want to do it. They feel that they committed a sin, so I believe the rabbis told them that it's not on them. In other words, he issued a rabbinical equivalent of a fatwa or a papal bull and told them that they're not, guilty of making the light come on because it wasn't anything they did with intent or design. I guess that's what they tell him. But anyway. Okay. So they're supposed to sign, it should be over by noonish. I believe Trump will be here today or tomorrow. I don't know what day. Addressing the Knesset of Israel. Now, if he gets a call from the Netherlands Nobel Peace Prize people, he'd probably say, well, I'll come over there and shake your hand and okay. So let me tell you the scriptures that have been broken by Israel. And the people that did this are Egypt, Muslim, UAE, Muslim, Turkey, Muslim, Saudi Arabia's got a hand in this, Muslim, and of course Trump, who's not a Muslim, but he's certainly not a God-fearing individual, all right? And Netanyahu, who's not a Muslim, not a God-fearing individual either. this is the problem, and it was done with intent, purpose, and design. So this is scriptures. This is Isaiah 31, verse 1. Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help. Where were these negotiations held? In Egypt. Has Israel used Egypt for years as it negotiated with Hamas? Yes. I'll repeat reading this again. Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help. Does not Israel go to them for help? And stay on horses and trust in chariots. That's Israel. They trust in the IDF. Because they are many and in horsemen, because they are very strong, but they look not unto me. They look not unto the Holy One of Israel. Neither seek the Lord. You see, they didn't go to Jehovah for help with this. Okay, the government officially, Netanyahu hates Jehovah. He wouldn't go to Jehovah. That you'd never see happen. He's a Satan boy, girl, whatever, you know. He doesn't go to God, okay? He just lies and makes people think he does. Okay? So this is wrong, and it shouldn't happen, and that's why they did it. Because they knew better than the Israelis do. Okay. That was in Isaiah 31:1. Now we're going to do Isaiah 30, verses 1 to 3. Woe to the rebellious children, saith Jehovah, that's the Israelites, that take counsel, but not of me. See, who did they take counsel with? Trump, Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, but not of me. Counsel not of me. That's them in Israel. And that cover with a covering, but not of my spirit. That's the Israelite leaders and the country. That they may add sin to sin, they're compounding the sins. That walk to go down into Egypt. They don't do that. And have not asked at my mouth to strengthen themselves. This they haven't done. Okay? How are they going to ask God for help when they're running around calling his son a bastard and a liar? You sure? No. That they may themselves in the strength. Okay, in the strength of Pharaoh, it says. Okay, so it says to strengthen themselves in the strength of Pharaoh of Egypt, and to trust in the shadow of Egypt. Well, they did that. Therefore shall the strength of Pharaoh be your shame, be your shame, and the trust in the shadow of Egypt, your confusion. Trust in the shadow, it means that they're kind of abiding in the shadow or the covering or protection of Egypt, that kind of thing. And that's going to be their confusion and their shame. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the end of them. It's not. Now, we're going to take up this scripture because I want to show you a contrast of how far Israel did not go at this point in time. And that's Jeremiah 42, roughly 13 to 19. But if you say, we will not dwell in this land, neither obey the voice of Jehovah Elohim, saying, no, but we will go into the land of Egypt, there we shall see no war. Nor hear the sound of the trumpet, that's the war, the war trumpet. Nor have hunger of bread, famine, and there will we dwell. O you remnant of Judah, go you not into Egypt? No, certainly that I have admonished you this day. So that they have not really gone into Egypt. Okay, that far they did not go. I just want to clarify it. Now, let's talk more in generalities about their errors in Hosea 7, verse 11. Because Ephraim, that's the 10 tribes normally it means. I gotta check this, hold on. No, we're good. Yep, we're good. Okay, because Ephraim hath made many altars to sin. Altars shall be unto him to sin. The 10 tribes, so-called lost tribes. I have written to him the great things of my law, but they were counted as a strange thing. You see, they don't understand the law today. They are all obsessed with the rabbis. The rabbis are just as bad as the prophets. It's the prophets as the pastors. It's the same garbage, and they lead them astray. So they don't dress right, they don't do the tzitzit right, they wear strange clothes. Where the heck does it say they should dress in black and white? What are they, nuns? Priests in the Catholic Church? Satan's false religion people normally dress in all white or black and white, and sometimes the high rankers, they get red. Why are the rabbis dressing in black? They're not mourning Yeshua. What are they doing? See what I'm saying? They lead the people astray. The people won't say Jehovah. They're not allowed to say it or write it. So they use the term Hashem, which means the name. Well, I don't know what name the rabbis are talking about. I have a bad feeling about that one, you know. They're bad. And the government's bad. And, you know, they keep the people, you do the physical things of the law. You know, you don't turn lights on Sabbath. You don't start a fire on Sabbath. You don't work on Sabbath. You don't drive a car on Sabbath. You know, stuff like that. Don't do business. Don't go to the stores. Don't, you know. Okay. And you observe the holidays. You go to the synagogue. And then you're saved. And you can commit it. They don't seem to mind adultery, fornication if you're not married, drunkenness, lying in court to sue your neighbor, suing your neighbor, gypping them, cheating them, unequal weights and measures, every rotten, stinking business practice you could think of, stealing houses and property from widows that are old and don't know what's going on. They do that to them. There was she's dead now, but an old widow right behind us. She was well in her 80s, and there was a line in, some people wanted to buy her house. I believe they were Arabs, because they moved in, a few of them moved in that area, and she wouldn't sell it to them. She just wanted to finish her life off in her house, that's all. She was very ill. She was going to the hospital, and she would stay in the hospital for sometimes 3, 4, 5 days, sometimes 10 days. There was some respiratory issue, and then she went to the hospital and never came home. We used to talk with her, and she was a pleasant enough woman. And they were trying to steal her property from her because there was one line in the paperwork on her house that was in error. So because they saw her a widow, an old widow, they thought they could take advantage of her and rip her off, right? So she went to a good lawyer who I know, and he fixed the problem with the court. The courts weren't about to do this. It was an oversight. And the real estate broker, who's a piece of garbage, I know, was working with some other people, and, you know, they wanted to get the sale of the property to these Arabs to make a commission, and they were basically trying to rob her house from her, and then say something like they can't. Exactly what they were trying to do, I don't know. One of the things they could have been trying to do is, this is wrong, she doesn't really own the property, we want to buy it. Or this is wrong, force her to sell the property, we'll give her a fair price. I don't know what. The woman was, I'd say, 85, 86, and she's going to move. It's a small house. She had a garden. She worked in the garden as much as her health allowed, which was generally almost all the time. She would go out and garden. You know, she was pretty harmless. She wasn't all there upstairs, you know. And that's what she was doing, you know, and they tried to rob it from her. And I'm sure they do this to orphans too, where the orphan gets an estate, the parents are riding in a car and they get killed in a car accident, or a bomb hits them, or who knows what, right? and a certain amount of money goes to the kid, and they try to rob the kid. You know? They do this. You know? I knew a lawyer. He took a case that children, a child, there was a child's parents got killed in an accident, and the child doesn't know what to do, so they appointed him a lawyer, and the lawyer began a litigation against the insurance company for $1 million. So this lawyer got the kid $1 million, and that was all the money the kid was going to have to live on until he becomes an adult. And he was perhaps 6 or 8 years old or something. And that would be to get him an education, a trade, and so forth. And the lawyer, in my opinion, probably could have got the kid $1.5 million or $2 million, but he didn't want to do that because then he would have to work for it. In other words, he'd have to get all kinds of expert witnesses involved in showing why these people were so wrong, and get experts to explain why this kid really needs $2 million to make it to adulthood because they stole his guardians, his parents, all this stuff, and put together a big case which he may or may not win, and the insurance company would go against him, or just reduce the amount by half, file the papers, and the insurance company doesn't fight. They say, well, let's get out of this. It's a good deal. And they give up $1 million because they know they're going to lose something if they go to trial. So instead of having to wait 4 years or 5 years to get his money, and they could always appeal it too down the road, he gets himself a quick settlement, right? And what did this guy clip? $400,000. That's his 40%. That's what he gets. The judge signs off on it. So he puts in, 50, 60 hours of work, maybe not even, maybe 25. And he gets 400 grand, and the kid gets 600 to live on for many, many years. Well, that's a great deal. See what lawyers do. I always wanted to go to law school. I got a master's in business, and then I wanted to go on and become a tax attorney. And the Lord stopped that, He didn't want me becoming a lawyer. Well, that wasn't righteous what this guy did. Can a lawyer do honest, righteous, fair things? Yes, you can. This guy chose not to. I mean, are they all this way? No, there's a small amount of them that are pretty honest and direct. You could have a lawyer that becomes a real estate attorney, or workman's compensation, and helps people get what they should be getting from insurance companies ripping them off. So can you actually be a good warrior and help the poor people get the money due them from the insurance companies? You absolutely can. How many do that? I can assure you it's not the majority. I don't know. But it's not, I wasn't going to be one like that. I was going to, you know, I wasn't a believer. I was falling for, you do whatever you can to get your client off the hook. That's all. I mean, the client comes to him and says, "Yeah, I did it." Talking about a murder. Yeah, I did it. I picked up the iron and cracked her in the head and it split her head open and she died. I did it. Well, why'd you do it? Because I caught her in bed with another man and I was enraged with anger and I had temporary insanity. So then the lawyer goes and pleads not guilty for his client. Now, that's the law in America, but is that really something as a believer you should do? You know, what the lawyers in Israel tell you is if you did something bad already, you can tell me it's okay. They can't make me tell on you. Anything that already happened, if you killed somebody or whatever, it's a secret. I don't have to reveal it. But if you tell me you're going to kill somebody or rob a train or something like that, then I have to tell them. I got an obligation. So then they say, don't tell me until after you did it. That's how they talk to you. I'm not here to pick on the lawyers. Can you be a good, righteous lawyer and help people kind of like, in a good way? You can. And some do. But so many don't. So many don't. So, yeah, the Lord didn't want me doing it. I wasn't going to be one of the good ones. I was going to be one of the bad ones. I probably would have taken criminal cases and got them off because I knew law enforcement before that. And lawyers don't think that that's a big advantage. You talk to, 25 lawyers, 23 or 24 will tell you, no, knowing how the cops work doesn't mean anything. Oh, they're so wrong. It means everything, but they don't know that because in criminal work, because you can understand. You see things when you read those police reports that that the lawyers don't really grasp. And you would understand what, rabbit trails to run down to help the client, I mean, but, to do all of this, you got a guy that's charged with some crime, he's going to get 2, 3, 4 years in jail, and, you come at this guy and you want to do all this work with private investigators and depositions and subpoenas, and, it's going to cost, $46,000. He doesn't have it. He can come up with 3, 4, 5,000. So what are you going to do? The guy says he did it. You work on a plea bargain, and you try to get the guy a lighter sentence. That's all you can do. If you come across somebody that's got $30-40 million in the bank, they can, say, yeah, I don't care if it costs $500,000, $750,000, let's do it. And then the guy goes to work, If you get caught for instance, you get caught for drunk driving, okay? There's there's expert witnesses that have like PhDs in chemistry and biology and stuff, and they'll come in and testify what's wrong with the drunk test, whatever test they did. And, they get usually 80% or more of the people off the hook. There's lawyers that go to work on traffic tickets that's not drunk driving, and they get about 80% of their people off the hook. There's, but that's in law, that's a bad money, it's what they call it, a cheap money hustle, Guy gets a ticket for, bad U-turn or something like that, and, what's the case worth to the guy? Hey, he might give you $1 or $2,000 or something like that. So you're going to put together a very simple case and go to the court with the judge. The whole thing will be over in 10 to 30 minutes, and that's it. You're not going to really get into it. Um, the other problem you get is when somebody's charged with a very capital crime, like a rape, a murder, a manslaughter, a homicide, large amount of drugs. They're facing a long time in prison. And as they get ready to go to trial, the lawyer will be asked or offer what he thinks the chances of them beating it are, and might suggest that they entertain a plea deal. And they'll do this irrespective of whether or not the guy was innocent or not. I had a lawyer I knew in Florida years ago that was he's probably dead now, was a bit older than me, good bit, was an extremely good criminal lawyer. He used to work in law enforcement. See, it really makes a difference. He was a deputy sheriff. And then he went to law school and he worked as a prosecuting attorney. And then he started practice and he did criminal. He did other things too. He did a lot of family law and he did criminal. He did other things. He helped me with a car dealer once. He helped me with a few things. People didn't want to pay me money they owed me, So, he was talking to me about a case he was doing, and the guy was a young guy, I think he was 18-ish, was being accused of rape. And there weren't really, it was not that there was, 3 people that walked in on the rape and saw him doing it. There was no cameras, there were no eyewitnesses. I think there probably was a rape kit, but he was saying it wasn't rape, it was consensual, And she wanted to run him up the flagpole, and they were in court, and the family had a lot of money, so they didn't care how much the lawyer spent. But at the end of the line, when the case was moving, he was really scared because if it went the wrong way, he's going to go sit in jail for many, many years. If he takes a plea, he maybe wouldn't even go to jail. Okay? Or he'd go to jail for a year or something like that, or he'd go to... I think he may not have gone, he had no priors, so he might have just had to go on probation for 5 years and attend counseling and stuff like that. So he still had a life, but I said, yeah, but he's got to go through life as a felon and a sex offender at that. He said, yeah, but it beats, spending, 2 decades in jail or something, So I don't remember how the outcome of that case. I don't think I ever knew what the kid actually did, but they were actually in the trial, and an offer to settle came up because when they're in trial, if the attorney for the prosecution, they call him a Florida attorney, I think, or something. He works for the state. He prosecutes, and they get a badge and an ID card like a cop, and they can carry a gun. They don't have arrest powers, as far as I know maybe they do, but I never believe they do. But they get, like a police officer. You open up the wallet and there's a picture ID, and then you got the badge, and then they give that to them. So of course they don't get traffic tickets, and if they go to the police station, they want to interview some cop or talk about evidence or something like that. They just show their badge, or if they want to go to a crime scene, they just show their badge. See, so it's a stacked deck. Can the public defender do that? Does the public defender get a badge and ID? Of course not. Do they work for the state just like the prosecuting attorney? They do. Do judges get badges and ID cards? In some jurisdictions, I think they do. They always get an ID card. And in Florida, they don't even need to get a pistol permit like law enforcement. As long as they got their judge ID card that's active, they can carry guns. Now, I know when I worked in law enforcement in California, I know judges would go to the police station and talk to the cops. You know how wrong that is? That's an ex parte proceeding, they call it. They're not supposed, now, if he gets caught there, he's going to say, well, I was just socializing. I wasn't talking about any cases. I wouldn't do that. That's ex parte. We were talking about playing golf next week. We're going fishing. That's what the guy would say. But what's he doing hanging around in a police station? See, it's incorrect. But they do it. See, so he's got police ID. The prosecutor got police ID. But the public defender, he has some sort of an ID card so he can get into the prisons and stuff like that. But it ain't going to look like the kind of ID you could use to not, to get out of a traffic stop or something like that. They're not going to give him any kind of ID like that. It's a joke, The judge works for the state, and the prosecuting attorney works for the state. So when there's no public defender, the private attorney doesn't. So it's a stacked deck. You don't have a chance in the court system, really. Not a fair chance. That's why God had the 70 counselors, and he'll do it again. Because they're men of God, and they're going to get led by the Holy Spirit and stuff like that. And that's what you want. Okay? If you go to court and you can tell them you're a believer, it's going to probably go against you because they're Satan bots. But, in the real system, when you have the 70 counselors, well, I imagine if the 70 counselors can't solve it, then it would go to probably not the prophets, maybe. It might go to the Apostle John. Or it might just go to Jehovah. The priesthood may just bring it to Jehovah. I don't know how they'll do it, how it'll work. Prophet's job can be a judge. Moses and Aaron were judges, so it could end that way, and then they could take it to Jehovah if they don't know what the heck's going on. There's a thing you get like fluke cases where you can't figure out what really happened, and the people aren't lying. They don't know what really happened either, and it occurs, and someone has to judge that, and we're not that well equipped, So the American system, I just tell people stay out of the courts. If someone sues you and you can't get out of it and you didn't do anything wrong, they just want to mow your lawn. Well, try to settle with them on the way. That's what it says. And if they won't settle with them and you tried to make a real offer, like if you didn't do anything wrong and they're just trying to sue you for $500,000, I don't think you have to come up and say, well, I could give you $350,000. That's not anything reasonable. But you could try giving them the money it's going to cost you to hire. Okay, guys, that was no sabotage. What happened is we had a surge in the power for about